So this week, if you were here last week, I gave you a little sneak peek of what we're talking about today. But before we get too far in that, I'm going to show a real quick video of something that demonstrates this series like this.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Do you have any reasons that you think of to be skeptical about the existence of God?
Pretty much just like everything that you see going on around here. Like everyone who's homeless, everyone who's dying.
The Bible was written, 400 years after the events took place? I mean, if somebody tells you a story and then tells you the same story 2 weeks, generally things change, and then we're going to be going over a 4-century period. It's really hard to get things accurate.
It's just something that makes people feel better about their existence.
There's no magical thing in the sky because scientists did studies. It's not real.
Just a lack of proof.
Religion is a great concept. Nobody really has it as a truth or a fact. You'll never be able to prove it, and that's the problem with religion.
It's kind of difficult to, ignore the inevitable and what's really existent for us, which is death, and we have no idea what's after it. We need to believe in each other before we believe in other things.
What has God done for anyone? God. You can't see that, but there's air quotes there.
I don't know, I just find that maybe if there was a God, people would be better off and we'd all learn to understand each other a bit more, but we don't.
Something like that can demonstrate many attitudes that maybe you've encountered, or even if you haven't, it's the reality that that's out there, that people believe that, or even I think there could be the possibility, the potential for even in a room like this that sometimes we have our doubts. And to be honest, I'm not a person or a pastor or anything like that doesn't have that has a problem with like people saying like, well, I'm not, some things I'm not sure about. Because I think what Jesus asked us is to follow him and to trust him and not to have all the answers figured out, but that trust him that he will answer those even if we don't. This is week 2 of our series called I Literally Cannot, which is the idea of there are hurdles and there are things in our life that sometimes make us just to the point where we're just like, I literally cannot believe fully in God because of these different things. And even if you don't experience that, there are a lot of questions and even skepticism about believing in God. And these questions or problems of God keep many people from believing. Now, this map that you see up here is, if you can see, it's not hard to see with all the colors going on there, but one thing you can tell is that there's our church, Rock Island First, right in the middle. It has a little gold cross, and there's a dotted line that goes around. That's a 3-mile radius. So who remembers in geometry what a radius is? Everybody remember that for the most part? So it means if you took a point, you went out 3 miles and then did a circle, that's 3 miles. And so you might be surprised that within 3 miles, according to the 2023 whatever study, says there's 74,826 people within 3 miles of our church. That's probably a lot more than you would guess. We actually played this game a little bit in our prayer time this morning. I said, I asked people, what do you think, how many people live? And we didn't have a number close to that, which is fine. I didn't know until I looked it up. But you got to think there's nearly 75,000 people within 3 miles of our church, let alone if you go out to the Quad Cities. We also know from studies given that 68 of those particular people, 68%, or almost 51,000 people, have no religious affiliation, meaning they're not just Christians. It's not that they're just not Christians. It means that they have no claim on any religion. They're not Muslim, they're not Buddhist, they're not Jewish, they're not Catholic, they're not whatever. Jehovah's Witness, Mormon, anything. They claim no affiliation. So that's for that 3-mile radius. That graph there is what's typical in the United States versus where we are. Do you see how we're way beyond what's average in the United States? We're way beyond even what it is in the Midwest, even if you looked at that. So that number at the bottom, estimated unclaimed population is 50,971 people within 3 miles of our building claim no religious affiliation. And even though we don't know where they would stand in the question of do they believe there is a God, we can tell you just from those numbers, or we can kind of infer from that or deduce from that, that they have not committed to believing out their belief if they did believe in a God, through any religion, because they don't claim any religion. And so one of the reasons that we exist as a church, or we believe that God has us in this place and in proximity to these people for such a time as this, is to partner with the ongoing work of God to reach and rescue our neighbors with the love and the truth of Jesus Christ. The whole point of that is that they can come into a saving relationship and start to live in partnership with God to live the life for which they were created by Him. And so a series like this is not only a series to be somewhat of an investigation for those of us who hold a Christian belief already, but it's also to equip us on some level to be able to speak about it with intelligence to our neighbors. And so last week, if you were here, if you weren't, you can go back and watch it online, but we talked about the hurdle of science, the science hurdle, I called it. And today's topic, though, is often called the rock of atheism, because many consider it to be the one thing, the single most thing, that theism, which is just the belief of God in general, this is the one thing that many say that a belief in God cannot adequately deal with. And this is the problem of evil and suffering. Is that some people will say, I can't believe in a God as long as there is evil and suffering. And so the big question that we are wrestling with today is there a connection between evil and suffering and the existence of God? How do those two things coexist, and is there a connection? That's what we're going to explore today. And just to remind you again, or to tell you if you weren't here last week, is that this series is a little more teaching than it is preaching, but that's by design, and so we're going to just put that out front there so no one has to say, you know what, that didn't really feel like a sermon. But in the day and age we're at, I think it's important, and I think it's productive and necessary. And so this hurdle that we have is a little different than most. We can talk about science, and it's very abstract. We can talk about the problem of one of the things that keeps people from coming to Christianity is our viewpoint on sex. And so some people will say, well, that's something, and to me that's a concept. The thing with suffering and pain, though, is that most of us have, or we know will, all of us, experience it on different levels. And because you and I can spend 30 minutes or so talking about it on a mental level, but there is part of us that has a hard time separating the personal and emotional side of it. Because it's very emotional, it's very personal. We don't have to start asking testimony from very many people, and they can tell you about pain and hurt and suffering that they have endured, are enduring, are going through right now. Almost everyone, if not everyone, has gone through something. The pain and the hurt of losing something is a big thing. Or maybe you had a rough childhood. Maybe you didn't have the dad or the mom that you deserved. Or maybe you experienced abuse, and you've been dealing with even being mad at God for allowing an abuser into your life. And I want you to understand or I want you to know that I understand that these kinds of things make connecting with this kind of topic kind of difficult because it's personal for you. It's personal. You don't have to think about, well, that's for somebody else. You can think, well, this is for me. And this topic of pain and suffering is emotionally charged, but can we pull back enough to answer the big question? Because every worldview is a belief system, and each one of us has to answer a couple questions. How do you deal with suffering, and what is the point of pain? And so every worldview generally has to wrestle with those questions, with those things. And so why do we have to answer that? Because it is one of those big questions we face throughout life. And whether it was a young family taken in a car accident, or a young father or mother with young kids developing a terminal diagnosis, or a childhood disease that takes a life, we struggle to reconcile in our mind why these things happen. Philosophers and thinkers over the years have wrestled with the meaning of pain for probably the entirety of human history. Unfortunately for us, we live in a time in history where we are less equipped to think through and deal with tragedies because many have been generally raised with the secular idea that there is nothing to life beyond the years we have here. And so we get to the idea that the point of life is happiness. And so the problem with that idea is whenever you buck up against something that's difficult, when you run into something that's painful, then you're saying, I'm missing the whole point of life. And so it makes it difficult to navigate this issue because we look at things and say, if it doesn't make me happy, I toss it aside. Things that bring pleasure, things that make life comfortable and easier are of the highest value in our culture right now because, again, for the culture, happiness is our focus. And so pain and suffering, they disrupt our happiness. Is anybody shocked by that? Right? No. We know that, right? You can tell stories. I was going along just fine, and then I got sideswiped by this event in life. And so we often have the problems we have, and we have a hard time reconciling pain and suffering with life because we think the point of life is happiness. And those things take so much of our happiness away. And still, though, there is the question, how do we view and make our way through evil and suffering? Now, we're going to talk about a couple ways that other people have chosen to view those things first. You have the New Age view. The New Age, kind of New Age religions or just New Age in general, there's this view that says the way that you deal with evil and suffering is to deny it exists. This is the ostrich approach, right? You stick your head in the sand. They're saying, nope, there's no such thing as that. This is the don't speak it into existence. You ever have somebody say that? They'll say, well, I hope my house doesn't flood. And then they're like, right? You're knocking on wood because it's like, oh, I don't want to speak it into existence. You ever have someone do that? Yeah. And so the idea, though, behind that is where if we kind of ignore it, then it'll go away. This is the power of positive thinking. And I'm not saying all positive thinking is bad, but some people take it to an extreme where they're saying, oh, there's nothing wrong, you know? I don't know, some of you might be classic comedy fans and say, it's just a flesh wound and your arm is missing, you know? Like that's that same idea. It's like, I'm going to ignore it and act like it doesn't happen. Pastor Mark Clark tells a story of a woman who was really upset with her friend who would not come to the hospital to visit her and her husband because the friend thought if she showed up, she'd acknowledge the cancer that this person had and it would somehow give it power. So she thought she was helping her by staying away because she thought that the cancer got power by being acknowledged. Unfortunately, there are versions of Christianity that believe this, and so they avoid the ideas of pain and sickness, thinking they just need to replace it with faith. Have you ever met somebody like that? They'll say, well, you're sick because you don't have enough faith. And you're saying, I don't know how to have any more faith. I'm completely trusting God. But there is an underlying belief that you can control reality with speaking or not speaking certain words almost like it's magic. I'm not saying God can't work miracles. God can, and He does continually. We've seen it in lives. You probably could give me testimonies of people that you have seen healed. But this New Age thought is that you can heal everything just by saying the right words, having the right attitude, and not giving it power by mentioning it. That's really a New Age thought. The Bible is full of what? Pain and suffering. Read the book of Job and tell me that there is no pain and suffering in the Bible. We're going to move on. The next view is the Buddhist view. Bless you. Buddhist believes that you can transcend pain and suffering through detachment. They say it's painful for you because you're too attached to things. So if you detach yourself from your house, then losing it won't matter because you aren't attached to it. This is the kind of the thought of like, oh, well, who cares? I'm not emotionally attached to that anyway. The difficulty in this belief, though, it doesn't take much thought to realize this, is that your attachment to people becomes an extension of this. And so they would say, in some regard, that the thing that's causing you pain is your attachment to people, and so you need to be unattached to people, and so you need to detach yourself from your friends and your family, and then you'd experience no pain. Other than the pain of having no friends or family. But outside of that, like, Christian view says we're almost like Legos, right? We were made for connection to one another. Buddhism, though, says you can transcend all of that by just becoming unattached. The Hinduist view. Many of us are familiar with this, even though if we don't know it's Hinduism. One of the main tenets of traditional Hinduism is the idea of, anybody know? Starts with a K. Karma. Okay, you did know. This is the idea that you get what you deserve. Now, most of us think we understand karma to a certain degree, right? Like, we wish the person that's mean to us would have some karma happen to them. We wish the person that cut us off in traffic, like, oh, I hope karma gets you. If we see them pulled over by the police, what do we say? Ha ha! Karma gotcha. Or if someone's just a jerk, you're like, your day's coming. Right? That's kind of like karma light. That's not really what the idea of karma is. Because the reality is that karma is the idea any pain, any suffering that you experience is a direct result of something you did in a previous life. And so you're to blame for all the pain and suffering in your life. So if something happens to you, you're not a victim. It's karma paying you back for what you did in a previous life. So when someone cuts you off in line, well, that's because you did something in a previous life. If a child develops leukemia, they deserve it because of what happened in their previous life. That is a stark contrast to Christianity, is it not? That says we deserved punishment for sin and disobedience, but instead of getting what we deserved, we get Jesus. And Jesus goes to the cross so that we don't have to experience what we deserved. Romans 5:8, Paul writes this, but God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. Karma says you get what you deserve, while Christianity says you get what you don't deserve, which is grace, which is the foundation of the gospel. The good news is you don't get what you deserve. And so the rest of it is just grace. The rest of it is just icing. The rest of it is just cake because you're not in that mode anymore. And so the reality of it is Christianity looks at these truths, and we kind of have these 5 premises of the Christian faith that we say are all true at the same time. And so there's a tension a little bit there, but we hold them all to be true at the same time. And they are this. God exists. God is all powerful. God is all good. God is all holy. And evil exists. Just because God is all powerful and just because God is all good, it doesn't mean he automatically just removes all evil. Because you and I know that true love that's uncoerced, that's unmanipulated, true love requires the freedom to choose to love or not. That's what's at the base of this. If you have kids, how many of you had more than one kid? Did your kids ever fight or get into a disagreement? Or were they your little angels and you just were like, oh, thank you, Lord? Right? And did they ever fight with each other? And then you say, you know what? You need to say sorry and give each other a hug and tell them you love them. You ever do that? You ever seen somebody do that? You guys be nice. Love your brother. Love your sister. Say sorry and give them a big old hug. That's forced love. Because you know what you get? I love you. I want to punch you, but I love you. Right? You ever seen those get-along shirts where it's like the kids misbehave and the parents put on one shirt and says, this is our get-along shirt, and they both stick their head through it and they're stuck in it together, and the parents say, you're stuck in that shirt till you can get along. That's forced love. The reality of the Christian view, though, is that for God to give freedom, for the possibility of true love, that same freedom allows for a rejection of love and allows for evil and wrong. And so because you have that freedom, there can be the wrong choice. Not only that, but what if suffering and pain actually allow for the greater good? This is the idea that there is a point to pain. Like some pain has a point. It doesn't necessarily mean that the pain was intended, but that pain can be used to develop us into something better. Now, if I'm losing you, just hold on. Think about someone that you know who has come from a rough life or has come from nothing. Saying, I grew up, I had nothing, I had no help from anybody, and they have overcome adversity throughout their life to achieve something great. We love those stories, don't we? We have little videos of them during sports things. They're saying this person slept on this couch for this long, or they lived in their car, and now look at them. We love those kind of stories. Many of you sitting here today are a successful story despite rough parts of your life. You had rough parts in your life, and you're able to say, even though all that I had that against me, I still was able to get where I am today. Because just like a caterpillar who has to wrestle through the cocoon, or chrysalis, if you're my kids listening somewhere, they'll correct me. But just like the caterpillar has to wrestle through that to become a butterfly, many of us credit those tough times with being partly responsible for making us who we are today. Right? We would say, I am who I am today because I had these things happen. It's the struggle and it's the getting through that brings about something better. It can sometimes be the paradox of parenting. You want to give your kids a better life than what you had, and so a lot of times what we do is we make it easier on them. But at the same time, you realize the difficult times and situations, they gave you resolve, they gave you determination, and they gave you hope that things could be better rather than being fragile. A lot of times when you remove all obstacles, then what happens is you create a thing where nobody knows how to navigate the difficult times. One of the stories that came out, does anybody remember the Biodome? Remember those things that built in Arizona like in the 90s? And it was this, if you're young, you're looking at me like, what are you talking about? But in the 90s, they built this biosphere. Maybe Biodome was the movie. Anyway, but they had this they're supposed to be an encapsulated world, and they sent people in there to live for 90 days. And the idea was that they would what would it be like if we had to build something like this and a catastrophic event happened? And what they found was there's all these things that broke and didn't work like they expected. And so when they debriefed to go through the reasons why, one thing they found was interesting was these trees would grow to a certain height and then fall over. They would get to be, I don't know the height, but they would get to be so high. Do you know why that happened? Because in the biosphere, there was no wind. And when the wind didn't push on the trees when they were young, it didn't teach their roots to hold on and to grasp on and to gain strength. And so when they got to a certain height, they could no longer sustain their own height, and so they fell over. Adversity builds strength and builds character and builds resiliency. There was a point in time when my wife and I were very hungry to be anywhere in ministry. We felt a call to ministry, and we're saying, where can we go? We're willing to go anywhere. And we prayed and we prayed and we prayed for God to send us anywhere, and instead He sent us to the middle of nowhere. He sent us to Madison, Indiana. And for us, that felt like the middle of nowhere. And so we left our families. We left our jobs. Dawn was attending a college called Otterbein University in Ohio. She left that, and we moved into a town called Madison, Indiana. I took a job, the closest job I could find was 130 miles round trip daily. And so 4 days a week, I drove 130 miles round trip, and Dawn attended college at Hanover College, which was in the area. I was one of 3 associate pastors at a church of 35 people. We were the youngest people by about 40 years, other than the pastor, who was 10 years younger than me. And so it was a unique dynamic, I'll say that. But it was so different, honestly. It was so different than what we thought we were praying for. It was so different than what we thought we wanted. Nothing went the way we expected it to. Nothing went the way we had planned. We didn't get to spend much time together. When you're driving 130 miles round trip and working 10-hour days, or when Dawn's attending school and doing schoolwork, we were like just 2 vessels passing in the night a lot of times. It didn't take very long for us to say, God, why in the world do you have us here? But I'll tell you, we were there for about, 3 years, 2.5 years maybe. We came out of that experience closer in our relationship, because all of a sudden we had to learn to like fight for it and when it wasn't easy. Closer in our relationship, not just with each other, but also closer in our relationship with God. There was a greater good that came out of the hurt and the pain of that situation. God allowed us, I believe, to go through that, and there was a greater good gained than if he had simply removed what caused the pain. That's just the reality of it. And this echoes Paul's words that we read in Romans 8:28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. Now, what people will change that verse around sometimes to get it mixed up, but it says, what it says to me in the Scott translation says, no matter what you're going through, God may not have caused the situation, but he can cause good to come from it. He can use any situation to bring good from it if we allow him. And so the bottom line today that we're resting on is that suffering can either be a pointless hindrance to life or it can be an opportunity for belief and hope in God. Those are the options, I think. The biggest example of suffering and pain that brings about good is Jesus Christ, who went to the cross. And because of his pain, by his stripes, we are healed. He went through the pain. He went through the suffering. He cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" He was stripped naked of his clothes and he's stripped of his dignity. He was beaten and he was crucified, suffering excruciating pain, and he died for what? What was the point of his pain? For the good that God the Father was going to go do through it. Through that pain and suffering, God offers a way for you and for me and for everyone to find forgiveness. Jesus embraced it to accomplish the most good. God offers a hope for more to this life than what we see around us, and Jesus can have empathy, sympathy, and compassion with us because he has suffered. He has been in pain. He can identify with you and what you're going through. He can say, I've been there. I know it's hard, it's difficult, but it is not the end of the story, so hang on. We'll get through it. And it may not be easy, but it'll be worth it, and it'll be good. When we cry out to God, he knows what that is like, and he offers to walk through it with us. But where is it all going? What's the point of everything then? We see it in Revelation 21. I think it gives this beautiful picture. Because I think sometimes we focus on everything that comes before that, and we're like, oh, it's all going to burn up and all this other stuff. But at the end, in Revelation 21, you have this creation of a new heaven and a new earth. And we read this in verses 3 and 4. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain." Praise God. That is our hope. Our hope is not in today or tomorrow going well. Difficulties will come. But at the end of the day, our hope is not in it, our life being easy or everything is going to make us comfortable, but our hope is in Jesus Christ. And that what we read in his word, we can bank on those promises that they will become true because what he has promised so far has already been true. And that's the goodness of God that we sing about. I believe it's when we believe in God that suffering and evil actually reconciles with God, who allows the freedom for each of us to choose how to live or how instead to love. Otherwise, if we don't believe in God and don't believe in the Christian view, if secularism is true, if the whole point of life is just to be happy, then evil and suffering are pointless. They're just pointless interruptions and hurdles to our lives, and they're going to wear us down. So what do we want to do with evil and suffering? Should we just ignore it? Take the ostrich approach? Stick our heads in the ground and be like, la, 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 it's not happening? Should we just see it as payback for something we did wrong in a previous life? Or do we maybe fall on the side of Joseph in Genesis, who was sold into slavery by his brothers, locked away for years in Egypt, even as forgotten for some dreams he interpreted, only to become powerful and save his dad and his brothers and the entire nation of Israel? Do you remember what he said to his brothers? He said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good." Satan means, for the result of sin, this brokenness, this hurt, this death, to kill and destroy. But God can work in and through those things, and that leaves us with the bottom line today. That suffering can either be a pointless hindrance or an opportunity for belief and hope in God. What will you do with that? Can we wrap everything up in a nice bow and have explanations for people that just completely convince them that we've solved this? No. It's a mixed bag, I think. We have emotional pulls on us, we have personal things with us, and this answer won't satisfy everybody, but that's how we answer it. We believe that God allows free choice. And for there to be complete love, there also can be the choice of something else. What I want to encourage you today is that if you have pain and hurt that you have never given to God, do that now. You don't have to hold on to it. You don't have to hang on to it. You know, there's that like saying that says you can either get better or you can stay bitter. That's the truth about pain and hurt. You don't have to ignore it and say it didn't happen. And we need to be reminded that forgiving someone is not the same as restoring the previous relationship. Forgiveness might just mean, hey, there's new boundaries, and I'm not going to hold that against you, and I'm not going to hold that close to my chest anymore. But if you have pain and hurt, turn it over to God. And if you wake up in the morning and the pain and hurt is there and you realize you picked it back up, guess what? His mercies are new every morning, and you can give it back to Him then. You pick up your cross. It's a daily decision that strengthens those muscles to say it's yours. Maybe you recognize that Jesus didn't come just to wash you clean of what you've done, but He also came to wash you clean of what has been done to you. Think about that. Not only does He forgive us, but He gives you the ability to forgive others and be made clean and new, separate from those things. So maybe instead of sitting in hurt, instead of being stuck in pain, realize that God is willing and He is able to use those things for your good. And if nothing else, you can realize the pain that you're going through gives you better insight into the pain that the person next to you is going through. And you can say, I know it's tough. And I know it's not easy. But God is still good. My hope is that this is not all there is to life, but my hope is in the fact that He says He is making all things new, and it won't be forever. It's just right now. Will you give it to God? Will you let Him know your pain? Will you let Him know your hurt? Will you let Him take it from you? And will you allow Him to fill you with His love instead? Because that's the trade-off. It sounds pretty good. Hey, give me all your junk. Give me all the things that happened to you and all the things in the way that you've done too. And I'll give you love. Sometimes we want to say, okay, forgive me what I did, but don't forgive those other people. Fortunately, that's not how it works. It's kind of that be washed clean or hold on, have it your way. I believe that what we ultimately strive for, what we ultimately want, is to be made free in Jesus Christ. And it doesn't free us from pain and suffering, but it can give meaning to it, and it can be the stage for God to demonstrate Himself great again and good to us again. Will you stand with me? Let's pray.